Cornet Global. My name is Lauren Bagel. I am the chapter president, and I work with All Steel and Gunlock here in Chicago. We're excited to bring to you our fifth and final track in our COVID series, Lessons Learned and International Focus. For those of you that have not been able to be on the COVID series webinars, they are posted on our chapter website. So feel free to, well, please do go and listen to them if they're of interest to you, or pass those along. We felt the series has been a great success, and thank you again for your participation. So up here, a lot of you have seen it, Zoom, we're using it. We recommend you put speaker view on. It's in the top right-hand corner. Make the speaker view larger by sliding the vertical bars in the center to the side. We've got everybody muted, and we are recording the session. Thank you to our sponsors. We say it, we mean it. We couldn't do what we do without them. They are all rock stars to us. So thank you for those on the call and for those who are not. And sort of last but not least, our upcoming events. Please be sure to visit our website regularly and look for our e-blasts. Check through your clutter. I myself have that issue regularly, even as about a 12-year veteran of Cornet. And be sure to check for what we've got coming down the road. A couple quick shout outs for this particular event. I'd like to thank Heather Turner-Loft from EUA and Carrie Ehrlich from CBRE for helping to put together this incredible group of speakers. And with that being said, I'm going to turn this over to Melissa Copley with Newmark Knight Frank, who's going to introduce our panel and get things started.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lauren. And I want to thank Patrick and Heather and Carrie as well for helping to coordinate our panel. We have a great lineup today. It's been great to get to know everyone. I will just give you a little on my background. I've been in the field of commercial real estate since 1988, working with occupiers, strategic planning, transactions, workplace assessments, overseeing relationships and managing accounts. I have global clients on a portfolio-wide basis. So my team and I have completed assignments in over 20 markets globally over the past 3 years. So we've had a very good exposure to the globe and what's going on in the various markets, including across the United States. I have a finance background, venture capital and banking before real estate. It's now my pleasure to introduce our panel. I'll start with Joel Horning, who's Senior Director covering the North, Midwest, and International portfolio for Capital One. He's been with Capital One for 20 years. His current portfolio is 3 million feet. He's managed other portfolios for the company. His responsibilities include client management, amenities, construction, FM, so just pretty much a wide range of occupier needs. He has a background in aerospace industry, mechanical engineer, and an MBA from William & Mary. Next, we'll introduce Paul Jaskowicz. He is the Global Director of Real Estate at Cantor, which is a company based in London. They're in 100 companies. It's an advertising-based consultancy company, which is privately held now with Bain & Company. WPP was the prior owner and still has a 40% share. Paul manages the portfolio globally for the company, and he's been doing so for 28 years or so. The company's portfolio is 3.7 million square feet across 100 companies. They have 400 locations. So just a huge number of locations to manage. They were going through portfolio strategies before COVID, and now that's being further investigated. Then we have Ward Komorowski, who is Vice President of the Enterprise Property Group and Security at Johnson Controls. And he's been with the company for decades. His area of expertise is FM and operations, especially for large commercial portfolios, real estate strategy, design and construction, workplace solutions, full gamut. Also security services, project management. And he's also responsible for JCI's 1,650 facilities, 1,650. It's quite a number. And then we go to Joey Radovan, who's Vice Chairman and Head of Occupier Services and Commercial Agency for Santos Knight Frank, so a related company of mine. He sits in Manila, the Philippines, and is joining us in the middle of the night. I think it's about 2 a.m. there. And look how good he looks with his jacket and everything, and just ready to go. Really appreciate that, Joey. And he is also head of the Coronet chapter there, and focuses on transactions, advisory services, and capital markets. He is a business leader there, and his education has been held in many cities: Philippines, Singapore, London, and Washington, D.C. So welcome, Joey. So happy to have you guys. With that, we have more topics than we could cover today, but we wanted to give everybody a nice kind of overview of what's going on. So we're going to move rapidly through about 16 different topics. And we've organized ourselves. So I'm going to call on people there, and we'll just begin now. First off, I'd like to start with Ward, and we'll go through each person about just what your role or activities have been since the pandemic, related to the pandemic. What have you been doing? Start with Ward.
Very good. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. First of all, as related to the pandemic, my role has changed a lot, added more hats to the hats we already have, as everybody understands in the real estate and facilities world. So I'm on the Global Steering Committee, developing guidelines and providing governance to our regional teams. I also lead the work stream for our journey to our new normal for all our North America headquarters facilities, making sure that our facilities are safe and ready to repopulate. And then I'm also managing our customer essential travel process, which includes validating local and government requirements and confirming hotspots. Like, for example, India has shut down all flights coming into India for 30 days until June 30th. And after that, once it reopens, all passengers have to quarantine for 14 days. We just need to make sure our travelers are safe and they understand all the risk.
Paul?
Yeah, so in addition to the normal transaction and typical real estate duties, I was on the business continuity team, which got us out of the office, on the team bringing us back into the office, and also on the what we're calling the return to place of work team, which is going to study how we come back to the offices and then look at what the office may look like post-COVID. We're also now putting health and safety under real estate as well, which had been done locally and not consistently. So now with standards that we have to impose on some of these offices when they do come back, we're taking over that role as well.
Great. Joel?
Yeah, similar to these guys, closely involved in the closing of our sites, getting folks out working from home, which was a monumental effort, as well as what we're calling the Great Return. So we're doing planning for that, getting folks ready for change management, getting facilities ready, figuring out what are short-term and long-term changes that we'll need to implement within the workspace. So yeah, and trying to also continue to run our facilities and keep them up and get any projects in that we can. So busier than ever right now, and running through a whole host of different scenario planning that I'm sure lots of folks out there are doing the same.
Great, looking forward to talking about that. Joey?
Yeah, so the last 90 days here have been really very, I would say, stressful, because we work a lot with occupiers here, and obviously the knee-jerk reaction is to represent them and go back to the landlords and ask for concessions. And so that has been a very interesting exercise, having been in the market for the last 25 years in the Asia financial crisis and the global financial crisis. So the outcome has been very different compared to those two.
How would you say different?
When those times came, especially the global financial crisis, some of these companies were very visible in CNN, you know, so like, for example, the big US insurance companies, some of the financial institutions, and the knee-jerk reaction for landlords have been to really give concessions. But, you know, they've learned from that, and, you know, these negotiations exercise, I think the best that we've gotten is really rental deferment, no concessions at all for the last 90 days. So that has been really...
That's an important point you made. How would you describe the cultural differences in dealing with the pandemic, Joey? You know, your country, Asia as well, versus say United States, Europe.
So for, I think in Asia, the one unique example would be Hong Kong. I use Hong Kong as an example because they had a situation in early 2000, the SARS epidemic. So their reaction to COVID was really unique because they thought they were ready, that they can handle it. This gave sort of a sense of false belief that they will be more disciplined and ready to combat the pandemic, contain the virus. But if you take a look at the stats most recently, this actually led to the second wave of infections in some of these countries like Singapore, Korea, and even China.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say have been the most effective government interventions overseas?
You know, nothing any different from what the other countries have done. We have, you know, gone into the enhanced community quarantine, which just really means total lockdown. And that is really the fastest way that the governments thought that they can contain the virus. No one was really ready for it. So it has been really the total lockdown solution. And currently Manila is already in the general quarantine period. So after 90 days, we're starting to go out and allow some sort of contact with the outside world again.
Okay. So Ward, how did the pandemic affect your real estate portfolio and your company's business, your clients' businesses?
First of all, I can say that the pandemic has truly tested our company's resilience and agility to be able to react to this. And so first and foremost, we needed to be flexible because the virus has impacted parts of the world at different phases in the time. In addition, it has caused some closures. Okay, for example, our business center in India has been closed and also created some revenue challenges globally. It does have some positives though. For example, it pushed us to recognize that when leveraging technologies like Zoom and Teams for collaboration, and it opened the doors for us to really look at our workforce and seeing who can work from home. In fact, our business center demonstrated that they were actually more productive during this time, and it's causing us to rethink our workplace strategy. So in addition to that, we also, just like Joey, has taken the time to go back to our landlords where we know we're going to be there long term. And we did what we call blend and extend, which actually created us globally about a $4 million savings in free rent and rent reductions. Lastly, in Mexico, one of our manufacturing facilities was deemed non-essential, and the government had us close the doors, which then tested our business continuity plan, and that was extremely successful. So from my perspective, that's how it really affects our business.
When you say blend and extend, what was the, how many years left on an existing lease? What was the longest one that you extended? Meaning,
so if we had 3 years left on a lease, we may go back to the landlord and say, hey, look, if we go an additional 2 or an additional 4 years on this lease, what could you provide for us? Okay.
3 years was the furthest out.
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So also I wanted to ask Paul the same question.
Sure. I'll start with from a business standpoint. We research advertising, and obviously a lot of advertisers just halted any of their research for a couple of months. So we had a lot of cancellations. We have a health division, which actually saw a huge increase in business based on the fact that COVID is a health-related issue. So from a business standpoint, we probably saw a pretty good percentage of our business in April drop, but we've seen subsequently, I guess I would say, less cancellations and some additional work starting to pop up in May, and we're hoping that we might have bottomed out and might start seeing things picked up. From a real estate portfolio standpoint, it's kind of interesting in that we had some big co-location projects planned. Bangalore was one where we were bringing 6 locations together into a new location. We hadn't yet signed the lease document, and of course, when COVID hit, we ended up canceling that project completely. And now we've got that on hold until we actually find out how we're going to work and what our new headcount may look like. We've had others in other parts of the world where construction was underway, and obviously construction sites were shut down. So the start dates of those have been pushed back, and we've been negotiating with those landlords to try to push back the lease start date and get some other concessions as well. But prior to COVID, having been just sold, we've been going through a rationalization of locations, and we've actually looked at city versus suburban office locations. And currently in places like Manhattan and London and Paris, we have big corporate offices where we have not only client-facing people, but we'll have some finance, HR, and operational type people. So we started to take a look at that and say, do we really need such a large footprint and such high cost real estate? And can we change what that office actually looks like in a big major city? Now that COVID's hit, obviously that's accelerated that plan and that look a little heavier. And we're starting to think about, is the office now that's in a city center more of a client serving office that may have some unassigned seating for heads down work, but mainly places where people can meet clients or actually co-locate as a team to have a strategy or war room type setting? And do we move some of our staff out to the suburban offices? In addition, we've always been agile. We've done utilization studies, and prior to COVID, our occupancies have proven to be around 70%. And as such, we build our offices to be 70, 80% of occupancy. Now, having proven we can all work at home, we're starting to think that number may be 50% post-COVID or even less. So we are undertaking a study with Gensler and working with our brokers as well to understand and try to model kind of a low, medium, high density post-COVID office. And when I say density, I should say actually utilization office, 50, 60, 70%. And then we're also going to look at how social distancing in those offices may take place with the ability to increase density once a vaccine is enacted.
Okay, well, we'll get more into workplace a little later. Let's get to just the asset classes that the folks on the call are managing. Joel, what would you say as far as the type of office that you, office space, call center, industrial, if any, asset class?
Yeah, for us, it's 100% office, but for utilization, we have a mix of pure call centers as well as people centers in urban locations such as London and downtown Toronto. And obviously lots of different ways that we've been able to respond and leverage sites. Some are still open because of ongoing operational needs, and some we've fully shuttered, as folks are able to leverage work from home much as they are here.
And Paul, is yours similar?
Yeah, I mean, we've had, well, with our call centers, we've been toying around with what we call caddy from home, where they can do the calls from home. But we are now going deeper into that. And there are some parts of our business where we had done face-to-face focus that we're closing those offices and using Zoom and other technology to conduct those types of panels.
Okay. And Ward, your portfolio with the mix of asset classes?
Yeah, and again, we have 1,560, so it makes me want to go back and update my bio. But we are down 90 sites since that bio was written, and we have roughly 42.4 million square feet around the world. And it's primarily in manufacturing sites, offices, regional headquarters, warehouse distribution. We have retail, but most of ours is our branch offices where we provide the controls for fire security, CCTV throughout the world. And then we also have call centers, just like everybody else, data centers, and then what I'd call the business centers that are located globally around the world. So, and again, you know, we were deemed essential across most of the globe. So our biggest challenge was making sure that we can support our employees, okay, and provide safety as a priority to our employee and still serve our customer.
Joey, I'm off my list of questions here. What cities have you seen in Asia or overseas where construction has been completely shut down?
Well, I'll start with the Philippines. Definitely the office construction industry here has been really big over the last 5 years. We have an annual take-up of almost 10 million square feet on an average. So that has been paused. So a lot of jobs has been really impacted. The major markets like Singapore and Hong Kong, they didn't really completely stop construction. So I think, as I've said earlier, depending on which country you talk about, they had a very different view of how to handle the pandemic.
Does any one of the panelists, did any of the offices around the globe stay open during the pandemic, or did everybody's offices close?
I think if we had some that didn't close, they at least had some severe restrictions on who could come in from time to time. But being in pretty much, you know, every region of the world, I would say that every office closed at some extent.
Okay. And
yeah, I would agree, at least for some period of time. We quickly got folks back in the office in Manila, but it required monumental efforts like putting people up in hotels and things like that. So
call center?
Yeah, call center there.
And what about the density of the call center and the fact that people are really high density space in call centers, right? How do you protect them?
Yeah, we've done a number of measures. A lot are similar to what you're seeing here from CDC. Some are different that are being mandated as Paul has mentioned, like different countries are mandating and requiring different things. For example, the Philippines mandates that we have to actually disinfect the tires of any vehicles that come onto the property. So, you know, we're trying to adhere to those things as well as, you know, kind of industry and worldwide best practices. But around the density, you know, it was how many people can we get in and still meet the rules and stay in compliance. And now we're at about a 50% density within our buildings, which are already pretty dense to start with. So, you know, we've got a lot of folks in there, but a lot of measures to make sure that we're adhering to social distancing.
So Joel, which offices and which countries are starting to open up, or have they opened already?
Yeah, I've seen, so, you know, Canada, UK, those countries have started, they're on similar paths to us, either a little bit before, a little bit behind us, but for the most part, they're following suit. And then, you know, countries like the Philippines, where the outbreak hasn't been as bad, India, I would say as well, I think you're starting to see those loosen up a little quicker. And then everybody's obviously monitoring how that's going to work in terms of the pandemic continuing to spread.
Joey, do you care to comment?
Well, what's the question again?
Oh, sorry. I'll give you that one since it's 2 in the morning there. We can repeat. Which countries over there are pretty much, is everything opening over in Asia from your perspective?
Yeah, so again, using the Philippines, we just we just opened up to general quarantine. So after 3 months of total lockdown, people are starting to go back to the offices, but not 100%. I think it's been an average of about 20 to 30%. Some of the companies have actually chosen to let their employees work from home until end of December. There's a bit of a mixed strategy. Some companies thought that without the vaccine in play, it would be too dangerous to anticipate the safety of employees going out there, taking public transportation, and going to the offices.
Mm-hmm. Paul, how about you?
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned public transportation because the offices that we do have open, the biggest challenge has been public transportation or the fear of in people getting to the office. For us, Asia is probably the most open. We have places in Asia where we're back to 80% occupancy. We're actually tracking on a weekly basis occupancy globally. Germany, we've opened up and about 10% of the staff has turned up. What we're trying to do is we've given them all a toolkit on how to open, but we're asking them all to follow first your local governances and what their requirements are as far as gathering and safety precautions to take. We really don't anticipate US or UK to actually fully open or at least open to any major extent until the end of the year or even post-vaccine. We're going to reevaluate in September and see if anything's changed on that. But right now, there's no rush to bring people back in and open the offices if they're non-essential.
So Paul, what about France, Paris, and Italy in particular, given what they went through?
Yeah, no, and we've had probably less than 10% turn up at some of those places. So there are some signs of life, if you will, but as a company, we're not going to push people back until we're comfortable that enough safety precautions can be held. Because the last thing we want to do, and even in our return to work and our business continuity plans, we have that agenda item at the bottom of the list always is phase 2, and we're hoping there's not a phase 2, but it's on the agenda every week, and we're all concerned about that. So we want to take a very cautious approach to it.
Yeah. So one of my clients who has offices over in Europe as well as elsewhere around the world, they are taking that approach where they're discouraging, if anything. They're saying if anyone doesn't want to come back, even if it's open, they don't have to. They don't even have to give a reason. They could just work from home. But the Paris office, the senior people there are actually trying to mandate that everybody come back. And the U.S. parent is saying, no, don't do that. So I was curious, of each of your companies, are you all taking sort of a hands off? If anyone's uncomfortable, don't come back. Don't worry, fine, keep working from home. Or are any of the offices actually requiring people to come back? Let me start with, well, I'll start with you, Paul, since we were just talking.
We don't have a general requirement. And it's interesting too, because in Asia, they're used, I guess, to dealing with pandemics, if you will, and they seem to be taking it more in stride, and they're showing up wearing their masks every day. And I kind of laugh about some of the calls where us from the UK and the US have said there's no way we're going to sit in an office all day with a mask on. So part of it is the fact that this is something very uncomfortable for us in other parts of the world to deal with, because we never have dealt with it. But yeah, there is not going to be a mandate at the current position we're taking to rush people back into the office.
And Joel?
Yes, I think part of it is where you're talking about and the ability for folks to work from home. So for example, in UK, Canada, everybody is working from home. They have the right technology and equipment, and they're able to continue, and they're able to be productive. So we're taking a slow, staggered, and safe approach to coming back, and that applies to those locations as well. In the Philippines, the calls continue and to come in, and we're not able to send the technology home with folks, and so therefore they're really not getting paid. So they need to come in, and they want to come in, they want to be safe, and they're obviously all concerned. But coming back into the office is actually something that we've asked them to do, and they've also wanted to do because of that, so they can get back to productive.
Wearing masks?
And wearing masks, we've actually just sent a mandate in the US to do that. That's actually going out today, that we're going to mandate folks wearing in the office. Canada is likely to follow. UK has not decided on that. They're kind of looking at what the government is going to mandate. I think when Boris decides to open the economy back up, they're probably going to couple that with some kind of mandate. And then, you know, as was mentioned previously, I think on the Asia side, folks are used to doing that, so that's a pretty standard thing. We're supplying them with PPE, and they're wearing it.
Okay. Joey, does your office provide masks and things like that? I don't know, hand sanitizer, gloves to
Yes.
your employees?
Yes, they do. I think for the basic medical support, that's really not an issue for everyone. Part of the reason why a lot of the employees are really looking to go back to the office is that while work from home has been tested, you know, the internet bandwidth in some of the countries in Asia is really not that strong. So the ability to actually work and stay connected 100% of the time still remains a challenge. And even the privacy of working from home, some of the families live in very small spaces, you know, 4 to 5 people are living in 300 square feet apartments. So there's really no privacy, and, you know, you cannot have an office. So it's been a challenge, and people have really looked to go back to work.
Mm-hmm. So let's move to facilities management a little bit with that. Ward, can you talk about what, say, changes to systems or processes that you've seen, for example, HVAC, hands-free mechanisms being put in, or apps, reducing populations, you know, as far as how many people can come back in the various locations, things of that sort. What changes have you been implementing? And in particular, if you could focus on any HVAC systems to mitigate or eradicate viruses.
Right. So yeah, we've, as part of the steering committee, what we did was we created and established a checklist that basically ensures that the facility is safe for opening for the employees. And it touches on all of these, and I'll go through some. For example, like if the local government lifts their restrictions, that doesn't mean come back to work, okay? They have to finish this checklist to make sure that everything is in place. So like, for example, visitors, suppliers, and contractor guidelines. How are we going to allow them in? How are we going to enter? Are we going to have simple entrances and exits? Where are we going to have, and we are providing face coverings to all of our employees, and how do we deliver them and distribute them? We reviewed every one of our facilities from a physical distancing standpoint, the 6-foot rule. Now, I know in Germany and Norway that some of the distancing is only 1 meter, which is far below 6 feet. Even though we're still mandating at our facilities, they follow the more stringent rules. We also, just like I heard a 50% capacity for maximum density on some of the call centers. We also calculated all of that for the facility to understand. We addressed all of our conference rooms, removed excess chairs, prop doors where we could prop doors, created flow traffic patterns within the facility, established quarantine rooms, disinfection policies and procedures, areas and stations for the employees to wash their own workstation and sanitize it. Understand your ability to have 3 months supply on hand sanitizer and masks. And again, engagement to the employees is critical, because you want to make sure that the employee feels safe coming back to work. And then we leverage technology. Not only are we providing the PPE, but we're measuring their temperatures every day as they enter the facility. We also require them to do what we call a self-assessment, so that if they have one of the symptoms or of COVID, that they then put themselves on quarantine, okay? From an HVAC perspective, you know, we looked at what ASHRAE talks about, basically it's really about bringing in more fresh air and allowing the unit to run longer that serves the space, okay? They recommend purging the space prior to occupancy. So we adjusted our on-time schedules for all of our equipment. We looked at the opportunity on the systems themselves to change what they call the MERV rating, and they recommend a MERV 13 to capture and contain all airborne viruses, okay? Looking at the additional UV lights within the air handling units, and then also looking at increasing the minimum outdoor air position, okay, for air changes. And in China, when China first started and they started to come back and repopulate our headquarters facility, the government mandated 100% return air. And if you've been in Shanghai in March, it gets quite warm. In fact, the office was sitting around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. With the chilled water system, the site decided not to put that on, okay, because the operational cost of energy would go through the roof. They reached out to the government, asked the government to, to reduce that. They now are allowing return air back on the air handling units, okay? So, and to just, with respect to, like, if I have locations where there's a landlord, okay, and I'm in a multi-tenant high-rise building, okay, we encourage all of our site leaders to engage with the landlord. And if the landlord's not following proper protocol, we all suggest that they get a neighborhood tenant group and jointly address the concerns with the landlord. More power by numbers, basically. But I will tell you, lastly, we now realize that we need to input language that attributes and reflects to these types of pandemics in our leases going forward.
What would it say?
Just about mandating, following the government regulations, being able to increase outdoor air, okay? Making sure that they're cleaning the touch points in the common areas. How are you queuing your elevators? Things of that nature.
Okay. And how about the touch-free? Are there cases where you're implementing those, as a company, or requiring landlords to do it?
Yeah, right now we're obviously looking at how do we deal with doors throughout the facility. Right now, some can be propped, some cannot. Restroom doors, the tow door pull situations that are out there on the market. The ability to create a automated door on some of those doors. Obviously, we can't do touch-free on vending machines, but I'm sure that's going to be coming up as individuals need to, make food at their location. So all of those things are in the mix right now. Water dispensers, things of that nature, using cups. All of that has been analyzed, and the market just isn't there yet, okay? So this is going to change a lot of the products in the future.
Thank you. Joey, let's move to market and leasing. In Asia, overseas, how would you describe the pandemic affecting the markets, the leasing market? Are you seeing a softening? Are you seeing lower rents? Are you seeing higher concessions? Because I am in certain key markets where we're active right now with our clients. I'm also curious, because we haven't really seen a spike yet in sublease space, but are you seeing that? Have tenants put projects on hold? Are they still moving forward? Have requirements been reducing overall, changing, stopping? How would you describe what's going on there?
Yeah, so overall in Asia, over the last quarters, the last quarter rents have not softened up. I think it's more of a pause. The period has been really short to push rents and capital values downwards due to lack of concluded transactions. Also, I mentioned earlier that landlords have those lessons learned from previous down markets where, it's a question of who's going to given first. And what I've seen and heard from colleagues in the region is that as much as possible, the landlords are actually delaying all these responses. And even as far as really not giving us much concession. So especially for those big publicly listed companies and very experienced landlords, they know that if you give in to these requests for concessions, then everyone else is gonna follow, because there's really no secret to this market. And most of the transactions that we've seen have been really going to what we call swing spaces. So these are temporary spaces where clients needed to lease into co-working spaces from 50 seats to as much as 250 seats. The sublease market hasn't really moved, maybe because there was this opportunity for these companies to work from home. There has been really very few net deals. I think in the Philippines, the biggest deal done was like a 150,000 square feet deal in anticipation that COVID will be solved later this year. Tenants have put their relocation and expansion requirements on hold. In fact, some renewals have stalled due to delays from getting official sign-off to renew that lease, official approval. So it's been really odd situation where your lease has already expired last April. It's already June. You haven't signed the renewal yet. So, landlords have been really patient, understanding the situation of these tenants. Of course,
Not putting them in holdover?
Well, no. I guess that is part of the concession, no holdover. They understand that the situation of companies, especially Fortune 500s, they're dealing with all these office situation globally. So, the excuse of really saying that, we're busy dealing with a global situation, please hold on for another 30 days. I've seen some compassion of landlords. But I think the next 90 days will be a good case study in terms of how Asia is really going to take this. As I've said, the first 90 days, landlords have held. But if, for example, the next 90 days, there's no sense of when there will be a vaccine for COVID, I think it would be a very different discussion.
Okay. So now I'm going to try and go through a few questions in a little faster mode. So Paul and Joel, actually, I'm sorry, Paul and Joel, I would like to know if you see U.S. companies pulling out of international locations, bringing operations back to the U.S. What's your take on that?
From our standpoint, no, we're a global company. We have no plans to pull out of any markets. What we may be doing is just consolidating and reducing footprint in some of those markets, but we have no plans to pull out. Yep.
Yeah, I would say exactly the same. We're gathering learnings just like we are domestically, learning that certain functions can actually be performed at home that we didn't think otherwise. So we're learning that could result in some consolidations, but ultimately no change in kind of our strategy of having those operations in those different countries.
Ward, you had a comment that you pulled out of, it was India, I believe you said.
Yeah, we didn't pull out of India. India, our business center was closed. There's nobody that can go to work. Okay, so we're waiting to reopen that facility.
Okay.
And in Mexico, the other site, which is a manufacturing site, the government closed it down during this pandemic. So what it really forced us to do is to implement our business continuity plan. And so again, you got to understand, where's the supply stream coming from? Where's the product going to be made? All of those plans should have been in place, and they were. So we were able to still handle the customer needs with that one plant shutting down. So again, that's the criticality of business continuity. It's not the short term, a tornado came through. It's the longer term event on how you retain the customer and the business.
Okay. And then for each of you, are any of you implementing permanent work from home strategies in any of your locations? Paul?
Yeah, so we've been agile as I mentioned, prior to COVID, but we are definitely looking at making work from home as part of our strategy, looking at legal implications as well as having people qualify, providing a checklist, having the right bandwidth and amount of internet, as well as having the right setup in their at-home office from a health and safety standpoint.
How about you, Joel?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in all locations, well, with the exception of the Philippines, to some of the points that Joey brought up earlier, the challenges there, but most certainly we'll see some long-term effects of that. Like UK, for example, never thought that they could actually pull that off. They are, and they're successful, and they're stable and working well there. There will be certainly some permanence to that model.
Do you see a reduction in your real estate requirements as a result?
I don't, because we're already exceptionally dense. So I see a de-densifying of the existing facilities is really what's going to happen here.
Joey, how about your office? Is there any plan to reduce the footprint there from a real estate advisory standpoint?
I think for now, no, because of social distancing, the utilization of the space has been really very limited. So, space reduction is not yet in play. And I think what's interesting is the real great study of the work from home to a lot of people. Like, for example, most of the transactions guys definitely can work anywhere, but also some of the support services have found that they can actually execute work from home. Except sometimes, the internet bandwidth really becomes a major issue.
Okay. And Ward, do you see any locations being permanent work from home, a smaller hub, anything like that?
Yeah, we've been, when the pandemic started, what we first did was we asked our managers to rate their positions on, can they work from home? Do they have to be in the office? And the third one is, can they work from home and need to come into the office and not affect their efficiency? And we were quite shocked that 10% said they have to come into the office, but 60% said they can work from home with no impact. Okay, so that caused us to rethink. And to the point earlier, our jobs as real estate leaders were to minimize the real estate footprint and minimize the cost. So we were always in the mode of how do we densify without affecting the efficiency and the proficiency of the employee. So now all of a sudden, with this coming into play, our management team is sort of rethinking it and saying, well, maybe we need to de-densify. Well, we would never be able to de-densify without taking on more real estate. So it's going to force us to go into that work from home strategy as part of the solution for our workplace in the future.
Okay. And so periodically there's been articles where somebody may say companies will take more real estate to have social distancing and more square feet per employee. On the tenant advisory front, I don't see that because that flies in the face of cost reduction, especially in a down or troubling economy. Does anyone here see an increase in rentable space for you or your clients? Paul?
Yeah, no, we don't see an increase in rentable space at all. And one of the things too we want to be cautionary of is overreacting to this as well, because if you think back to 9/11. Every office was putting up metal detectors and big barriers in front of their offices. And it was the same thing. We're all going to pull out of the big target cities, right? And that was a reaction, which was an expected reaction when something like that happens. And then things have pulled back. So I don't think we're going to take more real estate. I think the real estate that we're going to decrease would have been done naturally. And work from home, as everybody has said, with increased densification that we've been doing over the years, we're going to reverse that slightly. So most cases, the footprint will just reduce slightly.
Mm-hmm. Joel, do you see any increase in your portfolio? And let me combine that with, do you see your company and Paul, your companies adding markets, opening additional markets now or going forward once this is resolved?
I don't see us expanding. I think as Paul just mentioned, we're going to leverage, you're going to de-densify within the workspace, and you're going to use work from home as the pressure relief to support that, right? I don't see any new markets coming online right now. In fact, I think what we've learned is that we've got a newfound flexibility in being able to leverage work from home anywhere we need to, especially domestically, which doesn't require the load of the cost of real estate. So I could actually see further consolidations on a global scale coming from these learnings.
Yeah, I think we may see, and it sounds like you're the same way, is that there's some markets where we actually have a presence that people are working from home, and the presence we have is small. So perhaps those are reconsidered as to whether you actually need an office, a physical office in some of those markets. And if they're client driven, perhaps we can get a chair in the client's facility.
Yeah, neat trick.
And
so go ahead, Ward.
I was just going to add, don't forget that, in these situations, there's also a benefit to the employee. Like, for example, my commute to work is an hour in the morning and an hour so I get 2 hours of my day back. Okay. And then on top of it, I'm not burning gas to go to the office. So, and oh, by the way, I don't have to go to eat at the cafeteria, and I save money. So there's opportunity on both sides of the fence for the employee and then also the company, but you also have to look at the culture of the company and make sure you don't create a isolated workforce.
Mm-hmm. How about overseas, whether it's Asia or Europe, as far as this concept of hub and spoke? To me, that the idea of opening a new office, even short term, again, sort of flies in the face of cost reduction and capital, minimization. Also, there have been economists' commentary about the trend for downtown not being reduced, that it has been sort of a global phenomenon, and that need for retention and hiring of people, up and coming people, millennials, et cetera, who want to be downtown, that's expected to continue. But sometimes we hear, like Joel mentioned, of a company who might want to look at the suburbs. I also do think sometimes it's the real estate owners who are talking about who own real estate in the suburbs who want to see that hub and spoke come back. But thus far, there's been sort of very little reporting, smaller requirements, a couple thousand feet here and there type thing. And I'm curious to know if any of you overseas are seeing that kind of concept come forward. Joey?
Yeah, I think for some markets in Asia, like India, Malaysia, Philippines, where a big chunk of the transactions in office space is really back offices, outsourced operations, call centers. So one reason for a company to actually increase its footprint, if cost was a driver, is really going to be net take-up of space in places like the Philippines, India, and in KL, because that's the primary reason why we have this big market of call centers here, cost savings. You have to think that overall, if a publicly listed company in the US is really losing profitability, and they had like 5 things that they can do to actually manage cost, outsourcing has been that solution. And again, while the take-up of office space has been massive in places like India and the Philippines, the wage rate for the last 10 years hasn't really gone up, right? Which is really, really sad. So, and real estate is only 14-15% of the total cost of operating a back office in countries like the Philippines. Okay. Labor is the big arbitrage.
Yeah, absolutely. So one last question for everyone. I see Patrick, I know we're getting to the end of our hour. So for each of you, how do you think this pandemic will permanently affect real estate, and or when do we get back to normal? Let's start with Ward at the top and we'll go around.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think we're going to ever get back to normal. From my point of view, Johnson Controls has been coined the phrase, our journey to the new normal. Our CEO says, you know, the hare doesn't always win. Be the turtle, come back slow, come back safe. Okay, so, and think about what we can do to leverage our experiences during this process to be able to improve our what we call our organizational health, which is our processes and procedures on how we do things. And work from home will be part of it. And that really wasn't part of the culture of JCI. And when you think about just simple things like employee talent acquisition, if we can be more remote, we can also increase the net for talent.
And Paul?
Yeah, and that last point is actually interesting because we've talked about that with work from home. And, you know, again, work from home is going to be a larger part of, I think, anybody's business moving forward. But the talent piece is something we talked about. And we talked about in London, for instance, where we could probably recruit a whole bunch of people that we haven't been able to in
Right.
pockets of in the UK where London wasn't accessible. So we do look at that as an opportunity. You know, again, the concerns are mentoring and other things that we would have to try to figure out if there's requirements of people being in the office a certain amount of time, especially when new. But yeah, I think there's permanent changes that are going to happen. I think that work from home is going to become a large part of everybody's strategy from a real estate standpoint.
Joel?
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't, I'll differ a little bit from Ward. I think that, you know, somebody compared it earlier to 9/11, and, you know, like there's right now a lot of reaction to what's happening and speculation of where it's going to go. There's definitely going to be some long-term impacts and procedures that we'll put in place that will become the norm. There could be even some code changes or, you know, some laws and requirements that we now have to deal with. But I think ultimately everybody sees the value in being together. There's the, you know, the social aspect of being in the office that I think will continue to kind of push people back in that direction. Will I think it happen before there's some kind of technological advance like a vaccine? No, I don't. So I think we're going to be in this spot for quite some time.
Joey, care to comment?
Yeah, with everything that's been said, what would be interesting is I can feel that the word COVID-19 is going to be in future contract of leases, trying to figure out how tenant and landlord, if another situation happens, contractually, what will be the obligations? So I can see that really happening.
Well, I want to thank you all for participating and answering all the questions. You were great. Patrick, do you want to say a few words to close up?
Well, I do. First of all, I feel like we just all drank from a fire hose. It was a great, you know, very informative panel, and I feel like we could have gone on for another hour. So, Melissa, thanks for such thoughtfulness in preparing the questions, and thank you to the panelists. Before we go, there's one question in chat, and I know we're at the top of the hour. So this is from Jan Johnson, and as we talk about work from home, and maybe Joel and Paul, you can best answer, are you going to assign people to work from home? And if so, are you going to provide them ergonomically supportive, you know, home interiors, chairs, desks, technology, those sorts of things?
Yeah, and, you know, this is something we've talked about, and I don't necessarily think we're going to require, I think we'll have a qualifying checklist that's been talked about quite a bit to see if an employee qualifies, both from what their function is down to what their facility at home is like. In Manhattan, where you may have a millennial that's sharing an apartment with 5 other people that's the size of this room I'm in right now, that may not qualify, right? And those are the people that are probably anxious to get back to work, but others may. So I think it's not going to be a mandatory, but more of a qualifier.
Yeah, I will totally agree with that. The way we'll approach it is we'll try to target some percentage that we think is appropriate for work from home based on a variety of factors. And then first start with an opt-in, you know, survey folks who wants to be working from home, who discovered that it actually works better for their lifestyle, and a little bit to Paul's point, who qualifies for it based on their working environment and their ability to be productive at home.
Great. Well, thanks for staying on for the extra couple minutes to answer that. Again, on behalf of Coronet Chicago, thank you all for participating in our last in this series. And panelists and moderator, thank you so much for your time today. We'll close out today's meeting.
Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.
Thank you.
See
Take
everyone.
care, guys. Enjoyed it.